the new god of Pluperfectology, the new gods of Pluperfectology, the new god of Pluperfectology, the new goddess of Pluperfectology, the new goddesses of Pluperfectology, the new goddess of Pluperfectology, the old god of Pluperfectology, the old gods of Pluperfectology, the old god of Pluperfectology, the old goddess of Pluperfectology, the old goddesses of Pluperfectology, the old goddess of Pluperfectology, the greater god of Pluperfectology, the greater gods of Pluperfectology, the greater god of Pluperfectology, the greater goddess of Pluperfectology, the greater goddesses of Pluperfectology, the greater goddess of Pluperfectology, the lesser god of Pluperfectology, the lesser gods of Pluperfectology, the lesser god of Pluperfectology, the lesser goddess of Pluperfectology, the lesser goddesses of Pluperfectology, the lesser goddess of Pluperfectology, the higher god of Pluperfectology, the higher gods of Pluperfectology, the higher god of Pluperfectology, the higher goddess of Pluperfectology, the higher goddesses of Pluperfectology, the higher goddess of Pluperfectology, the lower god of Pluperfectology, the lower gods of Pluperfectology, the lower god of Pluperfectology, the lower goddess of Pluperfectology, the lower goddesses of Pluperfectology, the lower goddess of Pluperfectology, the greater spirit of Pluperfectology, the greater spirits of Pluperfectology, the greater spirit of Pluperfectology, the lesser spirit of Pluperfectology, the lesser spirits of Pluperfectology, the lesser spirit of Pluperfectology, the higher spirit of Pluperfectology, the higher spirits of Pluperfectology, the higher spirit of Pluperfectology, the lower spirit of Pluperfectology, the lower spirits of Pluperfectology, the lower spirit of Pluperfectology, the major god of Pluperfectology, the major gods of Pluperfectology, the major god of Pluperfectology, the major goddess of Pluperfectology, the major goddesses of Pluperfectology, the major goddess of Pluperfectology, the minor god of Pluperfectology, the minor gods of Pluperfectology, the minor god of Pluperfectology, the minor goddess of Pluperfectology, the minor goddesses of Pluperfectology, the minor goddess of Pluperfectology, the superior god of Pluperfectology, the superior gods of Pluperfectology, the superior god of Pluperfectology, the superior goddess of Pluperfectology, the superior goddesses of Pluperfectology, the superior goddess of Pluperfectology, the inferior god of Pluperfectology, the inferior gods of Pluperfectology, the inferior god of Pluperfectology, the inferior goddess of Pluperfectology, the inferior goddesses of Pluperfectology, the inferior goddess of Pluperfectology, the ancestor god of Pluperfectology, the ancestor gods of Pluperfectology, the ancestor god of Pluperfectology, the ancestor goddess of Pluperfectology, the ancestor goddesses of Pluperfectology, the ancestor goddess of Pluperfectology, the ascendant god of Pluperfectology, the ascendant gods of Pluperfectology, the ascendant god of Pluperfectology, the ascendant goddess of Pluperfectology, the ascendant goddesses of Pluperfectology, the ascendant goddess of Pluperfectology, the descendant god of Pluperfectology, the descendant gods of Pluperfectology, the descendant god of Pluperfectology, the descendant goddess of Pluperfectology, the descendant goddesses of Pluperfectology, the descendant goddess of Pluperfectology, the transcendent god of Pluperfectology, the transcendent gods of Pluperfectology, the transcendent god of Pluperfectology, the transcendent goddess of Pluperfectology, the transcendent goddesses of Pluperfectology, the transcendent goddess of Pluperfectology, the past god of Pluperfectology, the past gods of Pluperfectology, the past god of Pluperfectology, the past goddess of Pluperfectology, The past goddesses of Pluperfectology. The past goddess of Pluperfectology. The present god of Pluperfectology. The present gods of Pluperfectology. The present god of Pluperfectology. The present goddess of Pluperfectology. The present goddesses of Pluperfectology. The present goddess of Pluperfectology. The future god of Pluperfectology. The future gods of Pluperfectology. The future god of Pluperfectology. The future goddess of Pluperfectology. The future goddesses of Pluperfectology. The future goddess of Pluperfectology. The authentic god of Pluperfectology. The authentic gods of Pluperfectology. The authentic god of Pluperfectology. The authentic goddess of Pluperfectology. The authentic goddesses of Pluperfectology. The authentic goddess of Pluperfectology. The synthetic god of Pluperfectology. The synthetic gods of Pluperfectology. The synthetic god of Pluperfectology. The synthetic goddess of Pluperfectology. The synthetic goddesses of Pluperfectology. The synthetic goddess of Pluperfectology. The progressive god of Pluperfectology. The progressive gods of Pluperfectology. The progressive god of Pluperfectology. The progressive goddess of Pluperfectology. The progressive goddesses of Pluperfectology. The progressive goddess of Pluperfectology. The regressive god of Pluperfectology. The regressive gods of Pluperfectology. The regressive god of Pluperfectology. The regressive goddess of Pluperfectology. The regressive goddesses of Pluperfectology. The regressive goddess of Pluperfectology. The ordinary god of Pluperfectology. The ordinary gods of Pluperfectology. The ordinary god of Pluperfectology. The ordinary goddess of Pluperfectology. The ordinary goddesses of Pluperfectology. The ordinary goddess of Pluperfectology. The extraordinary god of Pluperfectology. The extraordinary gods of Pluperfectology. The extraordinary god of Pluperfectology. The extraordinary goddess of Pluperfectology. The extraordinary goddesses of Pluperfectology. The extraordinary goddess of Pluperfectology. The static god of Pluperfectology. The static gods of Pluperfectology. The static god of Pluperfectology. The static goddess of Pluperfectology. The static goddesses of Pluperfectology. The static goddess of Pluperfectology. The dynamic god of Pluperfectology. The dynamic gods of Pluperfectology. The dynamic god of Pluperfectology. The dynamic goddess of Pluperfectology. The dynamic goddesses of Pluperfectology. The dynamic goddess of Pluperfectology. The land god of Pluperfectology. The land gods of Pluperfectology. The land god of Pluperfectology. The land goddess of Pluperfectology. The land goddesses of Pluperfectology. The land goddess of Pluperfectology. The sea god of Pluperfectology. The sea gods of Pluperfectology. The sea god of Pluperfectology. The sea goddess of Pluperfectology. The sea goddesses of Pluperfectology. The sea goddess of Pluperfectology. The sky god of Pluperfectology. The sky gods of Pluperfectology. The sky god of Pluperfectology. The sky goddess of Pluperfectology. The sky goddesses of Pluperfectology. The sky goddess of Pluperfectology. The god of Pluperfectology. The gods of Pluperfectology. The god of Pluperfectology. The goddess of Pluperfectology. The goddesses of Pluperfectology. The goddess of Pluperfectology. The half god of Pluperfectology. The half gods of Pluperfectology. The half god of Pluperfectology. The half goddess of Pluperfectology. The half goddesses of Pluperfectology. The half goddess of Pluperfectology. The vessel of Pluperfectology. The vessels of Pluperfectology. The vessel of Pluperfectology. The name of Pluperfectology. The names of Pluperfectology. The name of Pluperfectology. The person of Pluperfectology. The persons of Pluperfectology. The person of Pluperfectology. The person of Pluperfectology. The personas of Pluperfectology. The persona of Pluperfectology. The personage of Pluperfectology. The personages of Pluperfectology. The personage of Pluperfectology. The personality of Pluperfectology. The personalities of Pluperfectology. The personality of Pluperfectology. The personification of Pluperfectology. The personifications of Pluperfectology. The personification of Pluperfectology. The image of Pluperfectology. The images of Pluperfectology. The image of Pluperfectology. The imagination of Pluperfectology. The imaginations of Pluperfectology. The imagination of Pluperfectology. The belief of Pluperfectology. The beliefs of Pluperfectology. The belief of Pluperfectology. The thought of Pluperfectology. The thoughts of Pluperfectology. The thought of Pluperfectology. The word of Pluperfectology. The words of Pluperfectology. The word of Pluperfectology. The action of Pluperfectology. The actions of Pluperfectology. The action of Pluperfectology. The reaction of Pluperfectology. The reactions of Pluperfectology. The reaction of Pluperfectology. The feeling of Pluperfectology. The feelings of Pluperfectology. The feeling of Pluperfectology. The situation of Pluperfectology. The situations of Pluperfectology. The situation of Pluperfectology. The circumstance of Pluperfectology. The circumstances of Pluperfectology. The circumstance of Pluperfectology. The environment of Pluperfectology. The environments of Pluperfectology. The environment of Pluperfectology. The relationship of Pluperfectology. The relationships of Pluperfectology. The relationship of Pluperfectology. The number of Pluperfectology. The numbers of Pluperfectology. The number of Pluperfectology. The formula of Pluperfectology. The formulas of Pluperfectology. The formula of Pluperfectology. The equation of Pluperfectology. The equations of Pluperfectology. The equation of Pluperfectology. The theory of Pluperfectology. The theories of Pluperfectology. The theory of Pluperfectology. The symbol of Pluperfectology. The symbols of Pluperfectology. The symbol of Pluperfectology. The color of Pluperfectology. The colors of Pluperfectology. The color of Pluperfectology. The thing of Pluperfectology. The things of Pluperfectology. The thing of Pluperfectology. The way of Pluperfectology. The ways of Pluperfectology. The way of Pluperfectology. The place of Pluperfectology. The places of Pluperfectology. The place of Pluperfectology. The time of Pluperfectology. The times of Pluperfectology. The time of Pluperfectology. The event of Pluperfectology. The events of Pluperfectology. The event of Pluperfectology. The result of Pluperfectology. The results of Pluperfectology. The result of Pluperfectology. The crown of Pluperfectology. The crowns of Pluperfectology. The crown of Pluperfectology. The throne of Pluperfectology. The thrones of Pluperfectology. The throne of Pluperfectology. The Pluperfectology King. The Pluperfectology Kings. The Pluperfectology Kingdom. The Pluperfectology Kingdoms. The Pluperfectology King Subject. The Pluperfectology King Subjects. The Pluperfectology King's Dominion. The Pluperfectology King's Dominions. The Kingdom of Pluperfectology. The Kingdoms of Pluperfectology. The Kingdom of Pluperfectology. The Pluperfectology Queen. The Pluperfectology Queens. The Pluperfectology Queendom. The Pluperfectology Queendoms. The Pluperfectology Queen Subject. The Pluperfectology Queen Subjects. The Pluperfectology Queen's Dominion. The Pluperfectology Queen's Dominions. The Queendom of Pluperfectology. The Queendoms of Pluperfectology. The Queendom of Pluperfectology. The Pluperfectology Prince. The Pluperfectology Princes. The Pluperfectology Princedom. The Pluperfectology Princedoms. The Pluperfectology Prince's subject. The Pluperfectology Prince's subjects. The Pluperfectology Prince's dominion. The Pluperfectology Prince's dominions. The Princedom of Pluperfectology. The Princedoms of Pluperfectology. The Princedom of Pluperfectology. The Pluperfectology Princess. The Pluperfectology Princesses. The Pluperfectology Princessdom. The Pluperfectology Princessdoms. The Pluperfectology Princess's subject. The Pluperfectology Princess's subjects. The Pluperfectology Princess's dominion. The Pluperfectology Princess's dominions. The Princessdom of Pluperfectology. The Princessdoms of Pluperfectology. The Princessdom of Pluperfectology. The Lord of Pluperfectology. The Lords of Pluperfectology. The Lord of Pluperfectology. The Lordess of Pluperfectology. The Lordesses of Pluperfectology. The Lordess of Pluperfectology. The Priest of Pluperfectology. The Priests of Pluperfectology. The Priest of Pluperfectology. The Priestess of Pluperfectology. The Priestesses of Pluperfectology. The Priestess of Pluperfectology. The Ritual of Pluperfectology. The Rituals of Pluperfectology. The Ritual of Pluperfectology. The Shrine of Pluperfectology. The Shrines of Pluperfectology. The Shrine of Pluperfectology. The Temple of Pluperfectology. The Temples of Pluperfectology. The Temple of Pluperfectology. The Leader of Pluperfectology. The Leaders of Pluperfectology. The Leader of Pluperfectology. The Follower of Pluperfectology. The Followers of Pluperfectology. The Follower of Pluperfectology. The Natural Substance of Pluperfectology. The Natural Substances of Pluperfectology. The Natural Substance of Pluperfectology. The Supernatural Substance of Pluperfectology. The Supernatural Substances of Pluperfectology. The Supernatural Substance of Pluperfectology. The Temporal Substance of Pluperfectology. The Temporal Substances of Pluperfectology. The Temporal Substance of Pluperfectology. The Spiritual Substance of Pluperfectology. The Spiritual Substances of Pluperfectology. The Spiritual Substance of Pluperfectology. The Natural Form of Pluperfectology. The Natural Forms of Pluperfectology. The Natural Form of Pluperfectology. The Supernatural Form of Pluperfectology. The Supernatural Forms of Pluperfectology. The Supernatural Form of Pluperfectology. The Temporal Form of Pluperfectology. The Temporal Forms of Pluperfectology. The Temporal Form of Pluperfectology. The Spiritual Form of Pluperfectology. The Spiritual Forms of Pluperfectology. The Spiritual Form of Pluperfectology. The Age of Pluperfectology. The Ages of Pluperfectology. The Age of Pluperfectology. The Era of Pluperfectology. The Eras of Pluperfectology. The Era of Pluperfectology. The Awakener of Pluperfectology. The Awakeners of Pluperfectology. The Awakener of Pluperfectology. The Awakening of Pluperfectology. The Awakenings of Pluperfectology. The Awakening of Pluperfectology. The Realm of Pluperfectology. The Realms of Pluperfectology. The Realm of Pluperfectology. The Dimension of Pluperfectology. The Dimensions of Pluperfectology. The Dimension of Pluperfectology. The Zone of Pluperfectology. The Zones of Pluperfectology. The Zone of Pluperfectology. The Frequency of Pluperfectology. The Frequencies of Pluperfectology. The Frequency of Pluperfectology. The Century of Pluperfectology. The Centuries of Pluperfectology. The Century of Pluperfectology. The Millennium of Pluperfectology. The Millenniums of Pluperfectology. The Millennium of Pluperfectology. The Purpose of Pluperfectology. The Purposes of Pluperfectology. The Purpose of Pluperfectology. The Meaning of Pluperfectology. The meanings of Pluperfectology. The meaning of Pluperfectology. The culture of Pluperfectology. The cultures of Pluperfectology. The culture of Pluperfectology. The demonstrator of Pluperfectology. The demonstrators of Pluperfectology. The demonstrator of Pluperfectology. The demonstration of Pluperfectology. The demonstrations of Pluperfectology. The demonstration of Pluperfectology. The manifestor of Pluperfectology. The manifestors of Pluperfectology. The manifestor of Pluperfectology. The manifestation of Pluperfectology. The manifestations of Pluperfectology. The manifestation of Pluperfectology. The presence of Pluperfectology. The presences of Pluperfectology. The presence of Pluperfectology. The glow of Pluperfectology. The glows of Pluperfectology. The glow of Pluperfectology. The goal of Pluperfectology. The goals of Pluperfectology. The goal of Pluperfectology. The plan of Pluperfectology. The plans of Pluperfectology. The plan of Pluperfectology. The book of Pluperfectology. The books of Pluperfectology. The book of Pluperfectology. The philosopher of Pluperfectology. The philosophers of Pluperfectology. The philosopher of Pluperfectology. The philosophy of Pluperfectology. The philosophies of Pluperfectology. The philosophy of Pluperfectology. The releaser of Pluperfectology. The releasers of Pluperfectology. The releaser of Pluperfectology. The release of Pluperfectology. The releases of Pluperfectology. The release of Pluperfectology. The variable of Pluperfectology. The variables of Pluperfectology. The variable of Pluperfectology. The cause of Pluperfectology. The causes of Pluperfectology. The cause of Pluperfectology. The effect of Pluperfectology. The effects of Pluperfectology. The effect of Pluperfectology. The journey of Pluperfectology. The journeys of Pluperfectology. The journey of Pluperfectology. The emergence of Pluperfectology. The emergences of Pluperfectology. The emergence of Pluperfectology. The source of Pluperfectology. The sources of Pluperfectology. The source of Pluperfectology. The originator of Pluperfectology. The originators of Pluperfectology. The originator of Pluperfectology. The origin of Pluperfectology. The origins of Pluperfectology. The origin of Pluperfectology. The forefather of Pluperfectology. The forefathers of Pluperfectology. The forefather of Pluperfectology. The foremother of Pluperfectology. The foremothers of Pluperfectology. The foremother of Pluperfectology. The ancestor of Pluperfectology. The ancestors of Pluperfectology. The ancestor of Pluperfectology. The descendant of Pluperfectology. The descendants of Pluperfectology. The descendant of Pluperfectology. The lineage of Pluperfectology. The lineages of Pluperfectology. The lineage of Pluperfectology. The heritage of Pluperfectology. The heritages of Pluperfectology. The heritage of Pluperfectology. The heir of Pluperfectology. The heirs of Pluperfectology. The heir of Pluperfectology. The co-heir of Pluperfectology. The co-heirs of Pluperfectology. The co-heir of Pluperfectology. The joint heir of Pluperfectology. The joint heirs of Pluperfectology. The joint heir of Pluperfectology. The dynasty of Pluperfectology. The dynasties of Pluperfectology. The dynasty of Pluperfectology. The force of Pluperfectology. The forces of Pluperfectology. The force of Pluperfectology. The law of Pluperfectology. The laws of Pluperfectology. The law of Pluperfectology. The pact of Pluperfectology. The pacts of Pluperfectology. The pact of Pluperfectology. The game of Pluperfectology. The games of Pluperfectology. The game of Pluperfectology. The mask of Pluperfectology. The masks of Pluperfectology. the mask of Pluperfectology, the armor of Pluperfectology, the armors of Pluperfectology, the armor of Pluperfectology, the sword of Pluperfectology, the swords of Pluperfectology, the sword of Pluperfectology, the shield of Pluperfectology, the shields of Pluperfectology, the shield of Pluperfectology, the force shield of Pluperfectology, the force shields of Pluperfectology, the force shield of Pluperfectology, the armored force shield of Pluperfectology, the armored force shields of Pluperfectology, the armored force shield of Pluperfectology, the champion of Pluperfectology, the champions of Pluperfectology, the champion of Pluperfectology, the guardian of Pluperfectology, the guardians of Pluperfectology, the guardian of Pluperfectology, the defender of Pluperfectology, the defenders of Pluperfectology, the defender of Pluperfectology, the protector of Pluperfectology, the protectors of Pluperfectology, the protector of Pluperfectology, the chant of Pluperfectology, the chants of Pluperfectology, the chant of Pluperfectology, the shape of Pluperfectology, the shapes of Pluperfectology, the shape of Pluperfectology, the cube of Pluperfectology, the cubes of Pluperfectology, the cube of Pluperfectology, the cuboid of Pluperfectology, the cuboids of Pluperfectology, the cuboid of Pluperfectology, the sphere of Pluperfectology, the spheres of Pluperfectology, the sphere of Pluperfectology, the spheroid of Pluperfectology, the spheroids of Pluperfectology, the spheroid of Pluperfectology, the prism of Pluperfectology, the prisms of Pluperfectology, the prism of Pluperfectology, the pyramid of Pluperfectology, the pyramids of Pluperfectology, the pyramid of Pluperfectology, the cylinder of Pluperfectology, the cylinders of Pluperfectology, the cylinder of Pluperfectology, the cone of Pluperfectology, the cones of Pluperfectology, the cone of Pluperfectology, the triangle of Pluperfectology, the triangles of Pluperfectology, the triangle of Pluperfectology, the circle of Pluperfectology, the circles of Pluperfectology, the circle of Pluperfectology, the semicircle of Pluperfectology, the semicircles of Pluperfectology, the semicircle of Pluperfectology, the square of Pluperfectology, the squares of Pluperfectology, the square of Pluperfectology, the rectangle of Pluperfectology, the rectangles of Pluperfectology, the rectangle of Pluperfectology, the parallelogram of Pluperfectology, the parallelograms of Pluperfectology, the parallelogram of Pluperfectology, the rhombus of Pluperfectology, the rhombuses of Pluperfectology, the rhombus of Pluperfectology, the trapezoid of Pluperfectology, the trapezoids of Pluperfectology, the trapezoid of Pluperfectology, the polygon of Pluperfectology, the polygons of Pluperfectology, the polygon of Pluperfectology, the pentagon of Pluperfectology, the pentagons of Pluperfectology, the pentagon of Pluperfectology, the hexagon of Pluperfectology, the hexagons of Pluperfectology, the hexagon of Pluperfectology, the septagon of Pluperfectology, the septagons of Pluperfectology, the septagon of Pluperfectology, the octagon of Pluperfectology, the octagons of Pluperfectology, the octagon of Pluperfectology, the nonagon of Pluperfectology, the nonagons of Pluperfectology, the nonagon of Pluperfectology, the decagon of Pluperfectology, the decagons of Pluperfectology, the decagon of Pluperfectology, the evolution of Pluperfectology, the evolutions of Pluperfectology, the evolution of Pluperfectology, the revolution of Pluperfectology, the revolutions of Pluperfectology, the revolution of Pluperfectology, the elemental art of Pluperfectology, the elemental arts of Pluperfectology, the elemental art of Pluperfectology, the elemental science of Pluperfectology, the elemental sciences of Pluperfectology, the elemental science of Pluperfectology, the elemental principle of Pluperfectology, the elemental principles of Pluperfectology, the elemental principle of Pluperfectology, the elemental technology of Pluperfectology, the elemental technologies of Pluperfectology, the elemental technology of Pluperfectology, the low elemental art of Pluperfectology, the low elemental arts of Pluperfectology, the low elemental art of Pluperfectology, the low elemental science of Pluperfectology, the low elemental sciences of Pluperfectology, the low elemental science of Pluperfectology, the low elemental principle of Pluperfectology, the low elemental principles of Pluperfectology, the low elemental principle of Pluperfectology, the low elemental technology of Pluperfectology, the low elemental technologies of Pluperfectology, the low elemental technology of Pluperfectology, the high elemental art of Pluperfectology, the high elemental arts of Pluperfectology, the high elemental art of Pluperfectology, the high elemental science of Pluperfectology, the high elemental sciences of Pluperfectology, the high elemental science of Pluperfectology, the high elemental principle of Pluperfectology, the high elemental principles of Pluperfectology, the high elemental principle of Pluperfectology, the high elemental technology of Pluperfectology, the high elemental technologies of Pluperfectology, the high elemental technology of Pluperfectology, the agent of Pluperfectology, the agents of Pluperfectology, the agent of Pluperfectology, the agency of Pluperfectology, the agencies of Pluperfectology, the agency of Pluperfectology, the amplifier of Pluperfectology, the amplifiers of Pluperfectology, the amplifier of Pluperfectology, the amplification of Pluperfectology, the amplifications of Pluperfectology, the amplification of Pluperfectology, the enhancer of Pluperfectology, the enhancers of Pluperfectology, the enhancer of Pluperfectology, the enhancement of Pluperfectology, the enhancements of Pluperfectology, the enhancement of Pluperfectology, the magnifier of Pluperfectology, the magnifiers of Pluperfectology, the magnifier of Pluperfectology, the magnification of Pluperfectology, the magnifications of Pluperfectology, the magnification of Pluperfectology, the influencer of Pluperfectology, the influencers of Pluperfectology, the influencer of Pluperfectology, the influence of Pluperfectology, the influences of Pluperfectology, the influence of Pluperfectology, the emanator of Pluperfectology, the emanators of Pluperfectology, the emanator of Pluperfectology, the emanation of Pluperfectology, the emanations of Pluperfectology, the emanation of Pluperfectology, the converger of Pluperfectology, the convergers of Pluperfectology, the converger of Pluperfectology, the convergence of Pluperfectology, the convergences of Pluperfectology, the convergence of Pluperfectology, the aura of Pluperfectology, the auras of Pluperfectology, the aura of Pluperfectology, the impression of Pluperfectology, the impressions of Pluperfectology, the impression of Pluperfectology, the intelligence of Pluperfectology, the intelligences of Pluperfectology, the intelligence of Pluperfectology, the sophistication of Pluperfectology, the sophistications of Pluperfectology, the sophistication of Pluperfectology, the genius of Pluperfectology, the geniuses of Pluperfectology, the genius of Pluperfectology, the polymath of Pluperfectology, the polymaths of Pluperfectology, the polymath of Pluperfectology, the psychic of Pluperfectology, the psychics of Pluperfectology, the psychic of Pluperfectology, the knowledge of Pluperfectology, The knowledges of Pluperfectology. The knowledge of Pluperfectology. The understanding of Pluperfectology. The understandings of Pluperfectology. The understanding of Pluperfectology. The wisdom of Pluperfectology. The wisdoms of Pluperfectology. The wisdom of Pluperfectology. The secret of Pluperfectology. The secrets of Pluperfectology. The secret of Pluperfectology. The mystery of Pluperfectology. The mysteries of Pluperfectology. The mystery of Pluperfectology. The revelation of Pluperfectology. The revelations of Pluperfectology. The revelation of Pluperfectology. The tactic of Pluperfectology. The tactics of Pluperfectology. The tactic of Pluperfectology. The strategy of Pluperfectology. The strategies of Pluperfectology. The strategy of Pluperfectology. The strength of Pluperfectology. The strengths of Pluperfectology. The strength of Pluperfectology. The might of Pluperfectology. The might of Pluperfectology. The might of Pluperfectology. The power of Pluperfectology. The powers of Pluperfectology. The power of Pluperfectology. The authority of Pluperfectology. The authorities of Pluperfectology. The authority of Pluperfectology. The dominion of Pluperfectology. The dominions of Pluperfectology. The dominion of Pluperfectology. The rhythm of Pluperfectology. The rhythms of Pluperfectology. The rhythm of Pluperfectology. The melody of Pluperfectology. The melodies of Pluperfectology. The melody of Pluperfectology. The music of Pluperfectology. The musics of Pluperfectology. The music of Pluperfectology. The lyric of Pluperfectology. The lyrics of Pluperfectology. The lyric of Pluperfectology. The song of Pluperfectology. The songs of Pluperfectology. The song of Pluperfectology. The dance of Pluperfectology. The dances of Pluperfectology. The dance of Pluperfectology. The spirit of Pluperfectology. The spirits of Pluperfectology. The spirit of Pluperfectology. The soul of Pluperfectology. The souls of Pluperfectology. The soul of Pluperfectology. The body of Pluperfectology. The bodies of Pluperfectology. The body of Pluperfectology. The mark of Pluperfectology. The marks of Pluperfectology. The mark of Pluperfectology. The promise of Pluperfectology. The promises of Pluperfectology. The promise of Pluperfectology. The visionary of Pluperfectology. The visionaries of Pluperfectology. The visionary of Pluperfectology. The vision of Pluperfectology. The visions of Pluperfectology. The vision of Pluperfectology. The picture of Pluperfectology. The pictures of Pluperfectology. The picture of Pluperfectology. The sound of Pluperfectology. The sounds of Pluperfectology. The sound of Pluperfectology. The tongue of Pluperfectology. The tongues of Pluperfectology. The tongue of Pluperfectology. The language of Pluperfectology. The languages of Pluperfectology. The language of Pluperfectology. The communication of Pluperfectology. The communications of Pluperfectology. The communication of Pluperfectology. The people of Pluperfectology. The peoples of Pluperfectology. The people of Pluperfectology. The society of Pluperfectology. The societies of Pluperfectology. The society of Pluperfectology. The fortress of Pluperfectology. The fortresses of Pluperfectology. The fortress of Pluperfectology. The government of Pluperfectology. The governments of Pluperfectology. The government of Pluperfectology. The city of Pluperfectology. The cities of Pluperfectology. The city of Pluperfectology. The nation of Pluperfectology. The nations of Pluperfectology. The nation of Pluperfectology. The civilization of Pluperfectology. The civilizations of Pluperfectology. The civilization of Pluperfectology. The world of Pluperfectology. The worlds of Pluperfectology. The world of Pluperfectology.